LevelsEdits, nearly 90,000 kills on Newcastle. Why him?
I just saw him being OP from the second I started using him. His abilities are so OP, but they are only OP if you use them in the right way.
When you compare him with the likes of Vantage, is he too big?
You shouldn't be worried about how big he is.
God damn, he's big.
I think people who moan about Newcastle being too big just don't know how to play cover the way you're supposed to. I don't want anyone to take offense to this. You play him wrong. It's one of the most OP things about Newcastle, but people either don't think of it or grasp easily.
What about his best team comp?
If I had to pick two legends, and I think many might actually disagree, a lot of people just don't utilize all aspects and only ever focus purely defensive. I think the top 3 mistakes I see is
We do not care.
I'm here with LevelsEdits, the man with nearly 90,000 kills on Newcastle, the #1 Newcastle across all platforms. And man, I've just got to ask, why Newcastle?
So I didn't actually come to Apex until season 15, and I didn't actually start playing Newcastle really until season 16. I came to Apex with my duo and I was struggling with who to play. I was very aggressive, so I was playing like Horizon, Wraith, all those typical legends. So she told me to play Newcastle, thinking I was fat and couldn't, move, but instead I now had a shield and an ult to yeet myself at people with, and I just saw him being OP from the second I started using him.
And so I guess it must be pretty weird now seeing everyone suddenly jump on Newcastle after pretty much no one played him for the first few seasons when he was released. Is it hard watching everyone play him badly, or are you learning from the way other people are playing him?
With me personally, I don't want anyone to take offense to this who do main Newcastle, but I do find watching other people play him that is pretty boring to watch. Unless I'm watching a high tier pro play him who naturally thinks in the way you should as a bigger character with cover, a lot of people just don't utilize all aspects and only ever focus purely defensive. I really enjoy watching him in comp scene, seeing a good Newcastle up there taking control of the fights and how they happen, using him to cover more ground in big open areas. I just find it really cool to see.
So I guess that leads on nicely to my next question, which is, what are the top 3 mistakes you see new Newcastle players making all the time?
I think the top 3 mistakes I see, one is resin. Just because one of your abilities is to res with the shield does not mean you need to res every single time. And this also applies to Newcastle teammates. You play him wrong. The amount of Newcastles I see who instantly go for a res instead of ulting, holding the push, etc. The times you should be sticking a res if someone gets knocked from a further distance, but there's enough time to actually res. When you're confident they can't push you easily, then hit the res. The amount of Newcastles I kill so damn easily because they're trying to insta res in awful and bad positions is crazy. Another one is positioning. Now this applies in a lot of different ways, definitely in ranked. But in the right mindset, you should be using Newcastle as an anchor. I see so many Newcastles in ranked who throw themselves into open or in bad situations because they got the mindset that, oh, he's got a wall, and a shield. And in reality, you want to be utilizing those abilities in a fight or holding position, not wasting them ulting back to your team. His abilities are so OP, but they are only OP if you use them in the right way. And the last mistake is his tactical. I see far too many people throwing it down in fights where it's just not needed, or a panic Q when you got so much cover around to play with, but instead you waste your tactical for no reason. So I wouldn't just throw it about if you're not going to actually use it to its best ability.
Okay, I'm going to hit you with a quick-fire double-barrel question. What is your favourite loadout on Newcastle, and what are your 2 favourite legends to have on your team as Newcastle?
I think on pubs, I'm always aggressive, and I think Volt and Shotgun like Mastiff or PK are my defo go-tos. But if you're not running shotguns on Newcastle in close range fights, you're kind of throwing. And if I'm playing ranked where I know I'm going to be using a lot more of a long range fights, I usually go Nemi or 301 or Flatline for the close range fights. And I mean, any legend can be good with Newcastle, to be honest. He's a legend that can sort of fit anyone's playstyle. But if I had to pick 2 legends, and I think many might actually disagree, but I really like Ash and Valk. Ash with like her ult for those easy outs when you need her, and then Valk needed for stuff like rotation, seeing where people are, to then when you're landing using Newcastle to be able to hold the positions where you know no one can come up behind you, etc, stuff like that. And I think it's low-key an OP squad.
I honestly would never have guessed Ash, but it makes a little bit of sense because I guess Newcastle can't really get around easily. Okay, on to the next one. What is your favourite Newcastle skin?
I think best Newcastle skins, anti-hero or techwear. In my opinion, I think they're just super clean skins, to be fair.
Newcastle's obviously one of the biggest legends in the game. When you compare him with the likes of Vantage, is he too big?
Nah, Newcastle isn't too big. I think it's the same with any legend that's big. I think people who moan about Newcastle being too big just don't know how to play cover the way you're supposed to with bigger characters. Boxes, etc. that you can play on for bigger characters, whereas for smaller characters, someone like Wraith wouldn't be able to see over that head glitch and would have to fully body peek. There's so many things as well, like little line of sights through these boxes that you can shoot through. It's just all how you play your cover. Not just that, he also has a shield and a wall. Like, you shouldn't be worried about how big he is.
I guess it's all part of the skill gap of learning a bigger character. Like you say, there aren't really many of them. So that leads me on to, if you have any advice for a new Newcastle main, what would you say?
I think the advice I'd give to someone for Newcastle would use him to split up people in fights. You basically have cover from each side. No matter what side you go on, you're protected from the other side. So try and utilize that by making it easier one-on-ones, or even for you and your team. Using Newcastle right in those situations, you're literally controlling how the fight goes. So really practice on splitting up your enemies with your abilities. It's one of the most OP things about Newcastle, but people either don't think of it or grasp easily.
So would you say he's more suited to M&K players, or would you say he's better for controller players?
I think overall he is better for M&K players. Definitely in comp, being an anchor, in reality you don't want a roller player being anchor, to be honest. Shield fighting tends to be easier on mouse compared to roller, and overall for his abilities, how they should be used, a mouse player would have a much easier time using them for the situations than a roller player would.
So being the absolute top of the pile for time spent playing Newcastle, you must see a lot of different skill gaps in Newcastle players. What is the biggest skill gap? What is the biggest difference maker between a bad and a good Newcastle player?
I think with the skill gap compared to people who can use them and compared to people who struggle, there's so many different gaps to cover. Using his abilities in good timing to make the situation you're in, being able to use his shield fluently in a fight where as a lower skill player would simply just place it, leave it there, maybe push his shield forward a little bit. Like utilizing his kit for defense for your teams in the right way. There's simply so much for Newcastle. People need to learn that the lower skill gap just won't think, which when someone who's good on Newcastle, they'll shine like crazy over the rest. So being able to use his shield to split up fights, being able to use his Newcastle out in, you know, bad positions and making it a good position to be in from his ult, to using his Q on reses where most people would just res and get their knockdown shot out. And there's so much more to sort of learn. Like, I can't even cover it in one sitting, do you know what I mean?
I think Newcastle might be the second longest legend to go without getting his own heirloom, so when he does eventually get one, what do you want it to be?
I think like a broadsword would be sick. Like a, I don't know, like a sort of knight sword that could fit in with his sort of like knighty vibe, if you get what I mean.
Before my chat with Levels was over, I asked him to set me a few challenges so I could go in as Newcastle, because I really love playing Newcastle, to see if I could use the advice he'd given me to become a better Newcastle player myself.
For challenges, oh, you're gonna hate me for this. To either take a 1-3-3 on your shield without taking damage to show me how you truly shield fight, or win a game with randoms by playing purely support. So use all your abilities to cover your teammates, but I want to see pure support. And yeah, good luck.
Well, doesn't that just sound lovely? In the spirit of Levels, I had already been rocking a Vault and a shotgun for the first half of this game, and it was putting in some serious work. The thing is though, there was a slight problem with the challenge of being a supportive teammate, because my teammates would literally rather die than let this big beefy boy drag them around. They did, however, have some questions.
Your controller, bro. Huh?
Ah. Use?
With macro?
No.
Nothing of that?
No.
Xbox controller?
When Level said play support, I don't think he meant tech support. So while my brain was trying to figure out what exactly was actually going on, I walked up on this Wraith using my shield, knowing I'd totally won the fight when my Valk queued her. Except, we don't have a Valk. Maybe if I wasn't being quizzed on what controller I used. It was fine though, and once I respawned, things were only getting better for us. It was Newcastle's time to shine. Knockdown shield, baby! Oh. Okay. Having genuinely no idea how I escaped, and not sure if I should shoot or heal, we were at least alive.
Come. What the f? You're so good. We're still in this.
Oh, you're so good. Give me sense and controller player, or
Yeah,
not like Xbox or PlayStation. Your controller.
Ninja play? Like hand placement?
Yeah, you play with pallets?
Guys, please. I didn't really have time to be thinking about that though. The pallet boys were on their way back in, but with conduit up my arm, I'd have to summon my inner levels to get out of this one.
GG, my
Bro, you
you're so
play
good,
with
man.
like PlayStation with a palette, like button behind the mallet, behind the controller, yeah?
Well, I didn't 1v3 on a shield or play traditional support, but I think I showed in that game that I can play a different kind of support. Babysitter. Subscribe or Newcastle will drag you across the floor in your next game. And the floor is very, very dirty.